Hi there again. Hopefully this is the last movie for this group. The third movie did go a little bit longer than 30 minutes, but hopefully we can all finish it up in this last video. Alright, so I talked about deleting and erasing files in the last video, so now what we're going to do is talking about moving files. And primarily you use the move command to move files to a different directory excuse me, on the computer. And so we're going to do a little bit with the move command, but when we actually talk about directories, we'll focus more on moving files to a different directory. Now, you could use the move command to actually rename a file if you wanted to. Excuse me. But it's not the same as the copy command, which we'll be talking about as well coming up, where you actually make a copy of the file. With the move, you're actually moving it from one location to another, so you could think of using move to rename the file to something else. For those of you who've used Linux, you have a similar command, the mv command, so you could pretty much have the same idea if you've used that as well. Now, a couple of things you need to watch about specifying when you want to move a file to a new directory. So for instance, let's do the dir command. And I've got a couple of directories here: Access, Custom Office, Notepad++. I deleted my test file, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new test file. Excuse me. So I'm going to use redirection again. Oops. Text. Alright, so I've got my test file out there. There it is. Now, remember I said a little bit ago that you could use the move command to rename files. Here is a gotcha that you have to be careful. When you move a file to a new directory, make sure you specify the directory correctly, or you've double-checked that the directory already exists. Because if you specify a directory to move the file to, and the directory does not exist, the file is going to get renamed, and then you're going to go, what the heck happened to my file? So, I'm going to attempt to move my test file with the move command, move, test file.txt. And let's say I've got, or I think I have, a directory called test files, plural. So if I just say test files, I think I'm moving my file to the test files directory. It says one file moved, so you think you've got it. So let's see what we've got with the dir command. There's test files, but look, no dir specification. So it renamed the file. So you have to be a little bit careful of that. Now I'm going to use the rename command to rename it back to what it was. So you do have to be a little bit careful of that. Now, you do have a couple of switches with move. When you move a file and the file already exists that you're going to move it to another directory, it'll warn you. So, let's say I want to change move test files.txt to, oh, what can I afford to lose? Nothing. I'll go for orders. And yeah, I don't have to. Orders.rtf. Alright. it asks, do you want to overwrite the file? So it does warn you before, even if you're going to use the move command to rename the file, it warns you if a file already exists. So I'm going to say no. And the switch, two switches, is /y, and I'm just going to do help move. So you have /y, which suppresses confirming. So it's a little weird. I guess the y represents yes, you want to overwrite. So the -y, the -y, make sure that you always get prompted before you overwrite an existing file. Now, the next command I'm going to talk about is the sort command. So, already talked a bit about ASCII, and sort is the command you actually use to create the files you need. Now, there are some switches. I'm going to do help sort. And sort, unfortunately, is one of those commands where when you do help, it just displays everything without pausing. Okay, so there are a few things here I just want to comment on. Excuse me. One is +n. It specifies the character number on the line to start your comparisons with. So, for instance, my files I have that all start with Miller and _Mark, these guys, I could say ignore those and start sorting at this character. If I had these file names in a file, I could say sort plus, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So on the 13th character, I could say sort that file by that character. And it wouldn't do any comparisons here or for Miller Mark. It would just do all the comparisons starting with these characters. Now, what's useful about this? It saves you a little time. Now, nowadays, with the processors on your computers being what they are, you're not saving a lot of time. But if this is a huge file of, let's say, 10,000 records, they all start the same way, at that point, yeah, you could see a little bit of speed increase since it doesn't have to do comparisons with things that never change. Now, the other thing with sort is you can do /r. What it'll do is it'll reverse the sort. So, as in the example I gave you and in the PowerPoint, where when you sorted a file and all text that started with numbers would be first, if you specified this switch, then all text starting with numbers would be last. So it's just like you would think sorting, instead of A being starting with A and going to Z, you'd have Z going to A. Okay. Now, there is another switch called /O, and what you're doing here is you're saying sort test files.txt /O sorted files.txt. What you're doing here is normally when you do your sort, all the data that gets sorted is displayed on your screen. Instead of showing all the data on the screen, you're specifying, I want the output of the sort to go into another file. Now, a little bit, I'm going to show you about how you can use something called redirection. You've seen me actually do it creating my testfiles.txt excuse me, file, and supposedly specifying this option is quicker than using redirection. Probably with a very small file you wouldn't notice much of a difference. Maybe again with my fictional 10,000 lines of data, maybe at that point you would. I honestly don't know nowadays with the speed of processors if you actually get that much of a difference. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use dir/w to create a file. And I'm just going to write over testfiles.txt. Alright? So I'm going to use type to display the contents of testfiles.txt to see if it gives me the data I want. It's close enough. Because what I want to do is I basically want to do some sorting to actually display things for you. So it's a little odd. Maybe let me do this a little bit differently because I really want the file to not be already sorted. So if I do wide, let's see, and I sort /o by extension. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a directory listing that's in wide format, so I don't have a lot of stuff, I just have the file names, but I want those file names sorted by file extension. Alright, so that should get put, oops, well, let's do help dir so I get the right switch. Let's see, by name E. Duh. Sorry about that. Alright, so let me specify this. E for extension, not X for extension. So there we go. Alright, so now when I type testfiles.txt, it's going to be sorted so things are not sorted by the first letter of the file names, which is exactly what I've got. So everything is a little bit out of order, which is really what I want. So now we can use the actual sort command. So let me just do sort testfiles.txt. Alright, so pretty much we've got everything. This is what happens when I create the file with just the dir/w switch, and I pretty much get the same thing. Now, what happens if I sort in reverse? Well, if we do sort testfiles.txt/r, and one of the things I haven't really pointed out is a lot of the times, I really can't say all the time, but a lot of the times you can specify the switches at the end of the command instead of just after the command you use. So that's what I'm doing here. I kind of did it without thinking about it. So again, this particular command, I can do that. So what I've done is I've reverse sorted the command. Now, what happens if I actually sort starting at a particular character? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All of these will probably be sorted correctly. I'm not sure what's going to happen with everything else, since we'll see what happens. Now, the one thing I don't remember is if you're supposed to start at 0 in count or start at 1 in count. So I'm going to go with 13 and see what happens. So sort /+13 testfiles.txt. Interesting. So everything's sorted by that character, and it's hard to see exactly how it ended up being. Miller Mark Excel got sorted way up here, but Word got sorted in order down here. So the W's, if they were in that 13th position, got sorted sort of. So it is a little weird, but I just wanted to try that out, see what was going to happen. All right. So so far you see that when you just use the sort command, everything goes everything goes to the screen. So I'm going to use the /O option, switch, and actually all I want to do is a simple sort. So we'll sort testfiles.txt to output file sorted file, files.txt. Now it doesn't display, so if I do type sorted files.txt, and there it is. Okay? So that's really all there really is to sort. You can only use it on text files, so I'm not really sure how useful it is anymore. Since if you're doing troubleshooting, you're going to want to create a file and then copy it to a thumb drive maybe, and then take it to a different computer rather than process the file on the computer you're working on. Okay. So that's it for sort. The next command I want to talk about is find. So what you can use the find command, and this is on slide 21. You just type literally FIND. You can look for specific text in a text file. So now that I've got a text file here, testfiles.txt, we can play with the sort command a bit. And one thing that you have to watch is find is case sensitive. So by default there is a switch to tell find to ignore case, but without any switches, if you just do find, you have to type what you're looking for in the correct case. So I'm looking for, let's say, Miller. Now the other thing to remember is what you're looking for has to be in double quotes. So find Miller in testfiles.txt. And what it does is it shows you first the name of the file and then the name of all the files it found that satisfy that. Now you can search for pretty much anything, so if I search for Word, it'll only find Word. And there's the files that have Word. Now notice wherever the characters capital W, O, R, and then little o, little r, little d appear, that file will get flagged out. Now, I want to redo the word find and but type this all in lowercase and see it doesn't find anything. So I just wanted to demonstrate that you got to type in what you're searching for. Now, some of the switches are /V. So find, let me recall Word, and we'll put /V. What that does is that tells find to show me all the lines that do not contain that text. So I'll do this, and note, interesting. Oh, true. It's looking for the word all in lowercase, so it's not going to find that, so it's going to display everything. My mistake. So I've got to go back and change this. So now we'll do it. There we go. All right. So nothing with the characters W-O-R-D with W capitalized show up. All right. Now what it'll do is you can specify /C to get just a count of how many times the text appears. 4 files. 4 lines contain that. All right? Or actually, in this case, 4 lines. If the text appeared more than once on a line, each unique instance of that would be counted. So if it appeared twice on a line, then I would get it would show the count including the twice on the line. Now, if you've got a long file and you really want to know where that text appears in the file, which line it appears, you can have it display line numbers with the /n switch. So this is saying this line is line 12, 15, 16, and 17 is where that text appears in the file. Now, the text, the switch to tell it to ignore case is /i. So now with I specified, I'll go back in, W. Now, if at all possible, since if you don't need to type a switch, it's just something extra to type in. So if at all possible, type in what you're looking for in the correct case. But it's possible you don't remember, or somebody else created the file and they weren't careful about capitalizing things. So you want to make sure you find where all occurrences of WORD are, regardless of case. So you specify /i. So let me do that, and it still finds them again. All right. Now there is another switch called /off. Let me do help find. For offline, normally find will skip any files or not look on any drives that are network drives. So what you want to do is, if you want to do a search that includes any network drives you're attached to, you need to specify this /off. And you can combine all these switches as well. So I can do find /i/n for displaying line numbers. And so make sure I find all of the files and that what line they're on. Okay. Now, copy. So when you want to make an actual copy of the file, and you've already seen me use that, it's fairly straightforward. When you do a copy, copy will check if a file already exists that you're going to copy the file name to. Now, let me do dir. Now, you can use copy to copy files to other directories, but you can copy files within the same directory. So just like I did to create Word Exam V10 earlier, I can use the copy command to simply try to copy something. So if I copy test files.txt over Miller, oops, excuse me, it's a bat, over my homework 4 bat file, it'll warn me that it's there. Do you really want to overwrite it? In this instance, I don't want to do that. Now, let me just do help copy. And the A and B switches here, ASCII and binary files, first off, you have to know the difference. You have to be able to identify which is a text file, which is a binary file. Obviously, any file that has a .txt extension is going to be text, ASCII text. But it's harder sometimes to recognize if a file's binary. You can think of the docx files as binary, the Excel workbooks as binary, the PNG pictures are binary. The reason you would specify that is if copy doesn't have to figure out on its own, and sometimes the copy goes a little bit quicker. Again, this is holdover for older machines when machines weren't as fast. Nowadays, you really don't have to worry about using those switches. Don't worry about /d for now. /v, verify that any copy you make is written correctly. You usually want to do that if you're copying spreadsheets, pictures, and It's going to let you know if it was written correctly or incorrectly. Use a short file name when you copy it. Really? No, we don't use that anymore, but again, it's a holdover. Now, just like with the move command, you can suppress the question if a file already exists. Do you really want to copy over it? Now, the only reason you would want to move, and I'm sorry, I just came up with another reason why you would want to do that, either in a move or a copy, is maybe you have a temporary backup file and you don't care if the temporary backup file gets written over every time you issue a command. So that would be about the only time you would use a /y. And then you can always have it ask you every time to confirm you want to overwrite an existing file. Now, it should actually ask you every time. And one other reason where you would want to suppress prompting is if you have these copy or move commands in a script file, you may not want you may not want it to ask you and pause the script file. And on the flip side, the -yes causing prompting to confirm you do want to overwrite a destination file. Sometimes the script files on this command line don't pass along the question about do you want to overwrite this file. So if you have a copy or move command in a script file and you want to make sure that it really will pause the script and ask you, include the -y switch. Now, Z, don't worry about in restartable mode. L, if you've got a symbolic link, those junction files, what it'll do is it'll copy the link instead of the actual file. You would do that if you want to just have a link at a different spot. You don't want to actually have a copy of the file at a different spot. So, and here it gives you a little text. The switch /y may be preset in the copy command environment variable. So that is already set, obviously, in the copy command environment variable since it's been asking, do you really want to do this? All right. That gets us down to the end of the commands I wanted to show you that deal with files. What I want to show you now is something called redirection. Now, you've seen with the sort command or the dir command, or any of the commands pretty much, that it always displays the text, or I'm sorry, displays the output on the screen. Excuse me. But you can have the output go somewhere else, not necessarily to a file somewhere else. So I'm going to talk about that. You've got 4 different redirection symbols, and this starts on slide 26 in the PowerPoint. So let me space over on the command line. You have greater than. Now, what the greater than does is I consider that a destructive redirection symbol. The reason for it is it sends, or when you use it, you're telling the command line you want the output from a command to be sent to a text file that you specify. The problem is if the file already exists, it will get written over, which it may or may not be a bad thing. If you don't care it gets written over, that's fine. But it will always get written over. So you could accidentally lose a file you've been keeping track of things in. So watch that usage. Now, the second redirection symbol is 2 greater than symbols right next to each other with no space. They're right next, hugging each other. Now, they essentially do the same thing as a single greater than. They send the output of a command to some text file that you specify. The difference is it adds whatever the output is to the end of the file. So if the file already exists, it keeps whatever's there and simply adds to the end of it. If the file does not exist, it creates it. So a lot of times it's just simply better to use two greater than symbols rather than a single one, unless you always know that you want to overwrite a file with redirection. Alright, I'm going to backspace over those. The third redirection symbol is a less than sign. What that is that says the command is going to get the data it needs to work on from a text file. And you usually don't need to use that at all anymore. So for instance, well, I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. Matter of fact, I can't think of any good examples where that's necessary at all anymore. So you'll hardly use that. And then finally, you have what's called a pipe symbol. And if you've used Linux before, all of these symbols are going to be familiar to you. They all do the same things on the Windows command line that they did in Linux. What the pipe symbol is, that's another symbol that you can't use inside a file name. That's a shift character above the backslash, above your enter key. What that says is you want the output from one command to go to be the input for a different command. Alright, so let's do some examples of all of this. Now you've seen me create files using the single greater than redirection. So let me do date/t, remember otherwise it asks me if I want to change it, to test new.txt. I don't think I have that. I don't want to overwrite my test files yet. Alright, so I have dir. Alright. Okay. So there's my test new. No problem. And if I do type test new.txt, there's my date, Monday. Alright? Now, if I do time greater than test new.txt, I get no error message. If I do type now it's just the time. It overwrote what I did before. So what happens if I want to add? Well, that's where the double greater than signs come in. So now if I want to add the date to as the next thing in the file, remember it adds it to the end of the file, always. So I do that, no error message, type. So now I have both the time and the date in the file. Right. Now I'm not going to try to give an example of the less than. You might go like 5 or 6 years using command line without ever needing the less than symbol. Like I said, I can't come up with any really good example of when you would use it anymore. Not on the Windows command line. Alright, so now I'm just going to jump over to pipe. Now, remember when I did the directory and created my testfiles.txt? So I actually had to do two commands, two separate times. I had to use my dir with the /w sorted by extension to create the file, and then I used the sort command to sort at a particular point, or just simply to resort the file? Well, what you can do is instead of creating a file, you can just simply send the text to another command and let the text either go to another file or be displayed on the screen, because you can combine these redirection symbols. So let's get my dir command /w/OE, and now I'm going to say I want the output to go to sort. So we'll just do sort, just like that. Nothing special. And so it should be sorted by extension, because that's what I specified with the dir command. But because I sent it to sort, the output gets sorted, and it looks like all I did was specify the dir command with the /w option. But this gives you an idea of how you can combine that. And you can actually do several different redirection commands. So let me actually do another pipe, and we can use find -n for I want the line numbers, Miller. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, it didn't work because it couldn't find Miller. Alright, so typing too quickly. Alright, there we go. There's all the Millers. Alright, and then finally, let's say, I don't need the sort really, but if you notice, it does tell you these are all right next to each other, which may be what you want it to be before you actually do the find. Depends. It really depends. So let's say, though, I don't want this on the screen. I actually want it to go to a text file. So when you want to redirect the output from linked commands like this, if you want it redirected into a file, that's got to be your last redirection. So what I'll do is I'll redirect it to millerlist.txt. So I've got 3 commands that are manipulating the data, followed by the redirection to a text file. So now, once you have, by the way, once you have a redirection to a text file, you can't do any more redirects. So this not only has to be the last item, you can't add anything, any other redirection after it. Alright, so when I do that, and I do type millerlist.txt, there's my output, just like it appeared on the screen. Alright, now I'm going to give you one last example that's a bit less complicated. Some of the commands, obviously, that we've talked about display everything, the output all at once without pausing. The dir command could do that, but it has a switch /p that will pause. But there are some other commands that won't pause. You could type as one, but of course you can use more instead of type. So what I'm going to do is, this is a networking command, netstat, and what I'm specifying is I want the communication ports that the computer is currently listening or talking on displayed. And it doesn't display things one page at a time, it just displays everything all at once. So I'm going to pipe this to the more command so that it will display things one page at a time. So Now, what's going on is it takes it a little bit of time to actually display, in this case, just the active connection. So I didn't really need to pipe it to more, but the reason it paused wasn't because of more, is it pauses occasionally to, it takes a little bit sometimes to display everything. So now, if I just simply did netstat without the A, it would give me every port, as they're called, communications port, that is currently open or listening or whatever. So, if I do that, it's going to take a little time. Oh, that's interesting. Alright, so netstat gives you the information. It takes a little bit of time, and I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to waste any more time on it. We'll deal more with netstat when we get to the networking section. But there is a command that will get me everything, and I was hoping simply that would do it. But I don't want to go looking for it right now and take up more time. Alright, finally, I want to just talk about printing a little bit. It's on page 28 in the PowerPoint. It's the last page. Right now, the command line gives you absolutely no way to print to a local printer. If you do a Google for printing, it'll talk about printing to line printers and LPT ports. That's LPT1, for instance. These are ports that are no longer on the computers. Unless you have a really old computer, you're not going to see an LPT port. You're not going to see something called a COM port either, COM. The LPT ports deal with something called parallel communications printers. You don't have parallel ports on your computers anymore. COM is for serial printers. Unless you've got an old computer, you're not going to see a serial port either. Everything is USB or a network connection. So right now the command line does not have a way to print to your directly connected USB printers. There is a way to print to networked printers, and I do mention that on the slide, but I'm going to hold off talking about how you do that until we get to the part about networking, because you need some prior information and understanding about how to specify network locations, and you just don't have that yet. So, when we talked about PowerShell, though, PowerShell does give you a way to, supposedly, to print to USB ports, and I haven't tested it yet. So I'll find out if that's true and how big of a hassle that is, so that when we get to the part on PowerShell, be able to show you that. So this is finally the end of the videos for part 2. There's 4 of them. Took longer than I thought it was going to, but I hope this helped you understand some of these. Again, if you're confused, please email me and or post something in the discussion group, and good luck.